Welcome to Aston Means Business. I'm Steve Dyson, the journalist presenting this regular podcast for Aston Business School. The podcast is now in its third series, subtitled SMEs Building Resilience to COVID-19 Challenges. We're interviewing small business leaders who are taking part or who've recently taken part in Aston Centre for Growth's programmes. They're sharing their experiences and explaining how they're developing their operations during these uncertain economic times. We're also talking to some of Aston Business School's top academics, getting their valuable insight, analysis and advice for SMEs. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Sandra Berns, the founder and owner of Centric HR, based in Staffordshire. Joining me to discuss Sandra's story is Mark Hart. Mark's the Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Hello to you, Mark.
Hello, Steve. Great to be back with you again.
Thanks for taking part in this podcast, Mark. We'll have a good chat once we've listened to my interview with Sandra. Joining me online now is Sandra Berns. She's the founder and owner of Centric HR, based in Staffordshire. Hello to you, Sandra.
Hello there. Hello, Steve.
Sandra, first of all, give us a bit of background about yourself and your earlier career in human resources, what we know as HR.
Well, it seems quite a long time ago now. It used to be called personnel back in the day, and I stumbled across personnel in the prison service, actually. And that's how I began. I really loved the whole thing about personnel and HR, and I went on to have a career in the NHS and then later in housing, and I progressed to an associate director level in the NHS.
And when and why did you launch Centric HR? What's the size of that company today in terms of staff turnover and client base?
I launched the company in 2016, and the reason why I wanted to have my own consultancy was really to help people and help other companies and SMEs grow. We've now got 5 members of staff. We've got about 10 or 11 associates. We grew it from nothing. It was just me on my own in the first instance. I think in the first year we turned over something like 35,000, and we grew it year on year. So in year 2 it was about 45,000, and I think in year 3 we took it to about 130,000, and then we tripled that in the kind of last year, and we're now on target for an estimated revenue of 400,000 at the end of this year.
Wow, that's some growth, Sandra. And it seems to me that the steepest revenues seem to have come in the last 12 months. And now that's a time when most businesses have been hit by COVID-19. How did you manage to expand in this really challenging time?
I think that we were on a growth trajectory, and we were always ambitious, and we wanted to grow. I guess it was a combination of things, really. I started on the Aston Business Growth course. I'd had a couple of conversations with some of the lecturers there, and particularly Mark Hart persuaded me that in order to grow, I needed to invest in the company so that it wasn't just about me. And at the time, I'd got a graduate advisor with me, and we worked really well together, but we were working just huge hours. And, you know, we needed to grow, and we needed to do something different. Otherwise we would burn out, essentially. And that was the kind of conversation that I'd had. And then when the pandemic came along, it was almost like this opened up lots of different opportunities and avenues for us as a company to grow. And we started to see other income streams that we'd not seen before. And so all of a sudden, it was such a scary time. We had a huge contract in the NHS at that time, and there were about 3 of us and other associates working on that contract, and that was bringing in a huge income, about 20 grand a month, and that stopped. We also had just taken on a head of HR, and that was quite a substantial salary. And for us, we were kind of, what's going to happen? Nobody knew. And so we decided, right, okay, we're going to help people. We're going to help people through this. We're going to take the knowledge and the specialist information that we have. We're going to research it, and we're going to become experts in this field. And I think that's really how we started to gain progress and growth and credibility within our own field. And then we just kept on growing and looking at other income streams from there, and looking and grasping other opportunities really to grow.
Yes, the knowledge that you had in HR, I guess this was crucial to many businesses who were trying to work out exactly how to hibernate their operations so that they could survive lockdown.
Well, in some ways, it was quite awful. We'd got clients ringing us up saying, Sandra, we're going to have to close the doors. We don't know what's going to happen. We're just putting everything on hold. Because obviously, until the government announced the furlough scheme, we had the employment law, which was layoff and short-time working or redundancy. And those were the kind of three options that companies had at that point. When furlough was announced, no one knew what this was. We had to research it. We had to work with an employment solicitor to understand the detail of it and make sure that we were accurate in our advice. And then we simply realised that there were other SMEs out there that were simply getting ripped off. They were on the point of, closing the doors themselves, or, having cash flow problems because their activity had fallen away. And they were getting charged extortionate amounts for real basic advice. I decided with my new head of HR and my graduate advisor that we were going to take a slightly different tack, and that actually we didn't know what was going to happen. So we were going to commit to really helping as many people as we could. And whatever happened, whether that grew our business for the future in terms of long-term trusting relationships, or whether we went down as well, we decided that we'd go out helping, and that we wouldn't just completely profit in a kind of what seemed to be a really challenging environment, which felt wrong to be taking lots and lots of money from small businesses for what was really basic advice.
I guess in some ways you were investing in the situation, and it's remarkable really how that original advice from Aston Business School, invest in the future, well before the pandemic, that advice eventually paid off.
It did pay off, because there is no way we could have assisted the bulk and the sheer volume of inquiries that we had. I mean, what we did is we started to do some webinars for a charitable service. So people would pay to come on the webinar. We would do the webinar for free, and essentially they'd get really good advice from us, but all their donation for the actual webinar would go to the charitable organisation to help them, because their activity was just gone. So we felt that we were helping the charitable service, and we felt that we were dealing with huge amounts of SMEs. So every Friday or Thursday morning, I would do a webinar. Sometimes we'd have 20 on, sometimes we could have 40 or 50 SME business owners on, and we would send them out free stuff. We'd send them out free templates. We'd send them out the webinar presentation. And then we also offered up a really discounted consultation hour, or even minutes, as I would call it. So a lot of business owners, they kind of knew what they needed to do, but they just wanted to talk to us on a one-to-one basis, just for a few minutes sometimes, to get the confidence to send out that template letter with maybe a tweak here or a tweak there. So we committed to people, you only pay for the time that you require, that you speak to us. And what that did is we had this influx of people and inquiries, and they would happily pay for 10 or 15 minutes, because we'd given them out these, wonderful freebies. And what that's done is it's cemented many, many longer term relationships where people have come to us, they've rung us back and they've said, okay, we've got through this little bit. Now we would like to make some redundancies, or now we'd like to help you. We'd like you to help us with business recovery plans, or actually, whilst we've leaned up this area, we need help with recruitment in this area. Or, hey, Sandra, can you help us restructure the business or restructure the team? So what it's done, it's really helped those that didn't have any cash in the beginning, and it's got them through that really challenging time. But for those organisations that are surviving, it's meant that they are coming back to us for other growth opportunities and, business recovery and post-pandemic recovery. People are already looking at restructures and rebooting themselves and marketing strategies from as early as February onwards.
I wanted to talk to you about that, actually. I mean, as we now head towards Christmas, with the economy still facing all the problems it's got, potentially quite strict tiers of restrictions hitting different areas and so on, ahead of any mass vaccination programme, of course. With all that in mind, what's your advice to other entrepreneurs out there on how they can survive in terms of their HR and eventually grow again despite such huge challenges?
They've got to keep on planning. What businesses cannot do is put their heads in the sand and think, oh yeah, it'll all go away, or what will be, or we'll pick it up when there's a vaccination, because you won't survive. You've got to plan. And, we've had some really difficult conversations with people where they've gone, well, we've got these 10 people and actually we're going to struggle on. And we've actually said to them, if you make 4 people redundant now, you've got a better chance of surviving. You can always take them back on again after the pandemic. So it's almost like if we help people really plan and do more planning and do lots of different forecasts for different scenarios, it's almost like those individuals that have done that, when they've done follow-up conversations with us or us with them, they've gone, well, it's okay because we've gone to plan C. And now that there's a complete lockdown again, we've had to go back to plan A. But it's almost like because they've thought it through and because they've thought their workforce through, by forecasting different scenarios, it's given them a map for the way forward, whatever that scenario is. So our smaller companies that, have planned for complete lockdown or a tier 3 or a tier 1 lockdown, they're managing to survive because they already know what to do. They've already thought about it.
That's really good. It sounds like you've given them some great advice. And looking ahead, what are your own plans at Centric HR for your future growth?
Well, our future growth plan is really exciting. We have remodelled our products and our packages, and we're starting to do more rounder packages for businesses. We've also developed lots of different income streams, so we're starting to tender for larger contracts now. We are also gateway providers for the new government initiative, the Kickstart programme. And this is such a positive income revenue stream because we're actually assisting smaller businesses with resources that are backed by the government for young people, which is something that we are really passionate about. So there's lots of young people out of work, either they've been made redundant, they're fresh out of school, or they've finished their A-levels, or they're even graduates, and they just cannot get onto the career ladder. So by using the Kickstart programme, we'll be matching up small businesses and these young people that are on universal credit to have 25 hours a week paid for by the government.
Sandra Berns, the founder and owner of Centric HR, it's been really refreshing speaking to you and hearing what you've done with different SMEs during the pandemic. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hopefully still online is Mark Hart, the Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Are you still there, Mark?
I am indeed, Steve. A fascinating chat with Sandra.
Several things that sprung out to me. Obviously, Centric has tripled its revenues in the last year, which is amazing in itself. But there's a specific thing that Sandra mentioned about your advice about investing so that it's not just about herself and how she put that advice into practice.
Well, look, I mean, yes, a lot of business owners like Sandra are blaming me for forcing them to go on a growth journey. But look, it's really quite simple. As far as I'm concerned, these businesses led by people like Sandra, they're ambitious. They've put their heads above the parapet. They have identified programs and initiatives that they want to get involved in. And obviously Aston Small Business Growth Program is one of those. And, if you come on a growth program, then you're going to have to expect that people who are delivering it, myself and my colleagues at Aston, are going to actually push these leaders a bit more. And, I think it's that's our responsibility because, I do believe, and certainly in the current pandemic, we know that small businesses, micro enterprises will be they will drive the recovery. That's the evidence that I look back at after the great financial crisis in 2008-9. Who was leading the charge in creating hundreds of thousands of jobs? It was businesses like Sandra's. So why wouldn't I push them to invest? But I want to explain at some stage later on, Steve, what I mean by invest.
Yeah, well, I was going to talk about the nature of it because it's not always in money, is it? I mean, obviously Sandra has invested resource, but also she invested in terms of giving free and very low cost advice.
Well, there's a couple of things that come out of that interview which really fascinated me. I mean, Sandra obviously saw that there was a lot of businesses out there who needed advice, and giving free advice to businesses as an HR specialist was really, really very sensible. Yes, there's a furlough scheme, but sometimes you need to understand, well, where does the furlough scheme fit within the overall HR strategy of the business? And I think Sandra has the expertise to offer that, but very cute indeed to be offering free advice. And then, as she said later on in the interview, Steve, to come and as a bit of a hook, to say, look, oh gosh, Centric was so crucial to us. Let's go back and engage them to do other work for us, which they will pay for. So I think that's one of the points that I saw coming out of that particular talk. But when I talk about invest, I'm talking about the business leader. And I keep using this phrase business leader because too often our participants see themselves, I just run a small business. No, they don't. They're leading. And therefore, when you lead, you have to invest your time. You have to invest some really serious thinking. And yes, you have to invest money. But I do not want these businesses to become debt junkies. That's not what this is all about. It's about saying, look, if you're sitting on cash, then think about how that could be usefully invested. Obviously, in times of crisis, having reserves is really important, so it's not about spending them all. But, when Sandra was on the programme, it was before the crisis, and therefore I was encouraging her to say, look, retain profits, bit of investment. Step back, invest your time, some of your senior management team. So again, it's what we mean by this term investment. It doesn't mean rushing to the bank and taking big loans with personal guarantees or getting involved with venture capitalists and, all of that. It really is taking a very sensible, appropriate way forward in terms of investing in your business.
It seems to me that a lot of people have noticed what Sandra's doing, obviously in terms of her revenues growing, but she's also being successful in setting herself up on the Kickstart programme with the government. So the authorities themselves see that it's important that successful businesses like Sandra can help lead others to grow.
That program is really, really important. Let's be clear about that. It's taken a while to get going, and it's been slow. And certain there has been some negative comments about it from who are the providers and how it gets moving forward. However, it is now building momentum, and I think that's really important. So yes, I mean, businesses like Sandra's will rise heads above the parapet. They'll become noticed. They'll become trusted partners in government initiatives, and I think that's really terrific.
Can you give me any other examples, Mark, of where you've seen such investments, whether it's time or money or resource or staff or, as in Sandra's case, free advice or low-cost advice? Can you give me some other examples of where such investment has paid off, either with your own business cohort, students, or with other businesses in the wider economy?
Well, look, I mean, I think this year in particular, we've been running our Aston Small Business Growth programs as other programs for government. We've been running as well the Small Business Leadership program, which was announced by Bayes in August. We're delivering 3 cohorts of that at Aston at the moment. The Productivity Through People program, work for MSD UK, whole range of programs, and I've got a huge number of examples whereby, gently encouraging people. And don't forget, when I'm talking to these businesses in the autumn of 2020, they've gone through the real rough road since March, since the first national lockdown. We've just come out of a second national lockdown. Fingers crossed, we won't have another national lockdown. And I make no comment about the public health issue. It's not relevant. But the point is that these businesses have survived. They have been resilient. and that means that they're in a great position. So what have they been doing? Well, we've seen businesses who've used the bounce back loans, for example, who have used the furlough scheme effectively, who've moved their businesses online. Steve, we have a whole range of podcasts. I mean, the examples you're asking for, I think you've been talking to them all since we started these podcasts at the back of the year. But yes, I think the point is that this is free money for a year bounce back loan. So why? So rather than you put it in reserves, put half of it in reserves, and think about a bit of kit you need. Think about I've been encouraging businesses at this time to think about digital adoption. Again, we've been running a program for Bays on Business Basics about technical, new technologies, digital adoption, and again, this is really, really important. So investing in some data analytics, bit of automation of some of the back office stuff. So I'm encouraging businesses to take time to make their business a bit leaner, which I think is really important. So rather than singling out particular businesses, I would simply say, look, it is clear to me that a lot of businesses are actually taking the time. And it depends on sector, of course, because obviously if we're looking at arts and entertainment and hospitality, those sectors are really, really suffering. And it's really difficult for them to be the investment. A business like Sandra's is obviously one in which, she's operating across a whole range of sectors and the business is always there. And I think that's really important. But, it's using the support and, the Chancellor says it's generous support. Yes, it is. And it can be used wisely at this time rather than just seen as a panic just to keep the business ticking over. So I would encourage people to get advice. A lot of business schools, universities across the country are running programs like we are at Aston. Get in contact with independent advice to see whether in fact you should be doing something else rather than just battening down the hatches and hoping for the best.
Mark, as well as the great advice that people like you and other universities can give to businesses, and as well as their own investment and efforts, what else do they need? Maybe I'm talking about from government or from whichever authorities. What else do they need in what is hopefully a final push towards some kind of neo-normality?
Well, look, let me put some context around this. Normality, looking at the predictions for 21 and into 22, this is going to be a rough ride. So I don't know what we mean by normality, but getting over the immediate crisis with the vaccine arriving, with the pandemic, we may begin to take the acute problems with the pandemic away from the front line of business. So I'm hopeful that by mid 21 that might be the case. I think in terms of the wider set of advice I would give, it's a bit clear about financial management. I think it's very important that businesses have a 13-week rolling cash flow forecast. I've made that point before on many occasions in these podcasts. That's crucial. So financial management and control is super essential. Keeping in contact with your staff, making sure that you understand the challenges. I mean, 26%, about 1 in 4 of the private sector is still working from home. So understanding the challenges, it's okay for a few weeks, but now, I know at our own university, my colleagues in the Aston Centre for Growth have been working from home since March. I mean, that's a hard gig. And, translating that into every business across the country who are able to work from home. And that means that we've got to be very careful about employee engagement, keep your staff motivated. It's very difficult when they're perhaps not equipped at home to have an office. They're doing stuff in their bedroom and their kitchen table with other people in the household. It's very difficult. Employee engagement is important. Being very clued into market conditions, being very clear you're not overstretching in terms of what's happening. It's having a short-term view in terms of where your business is. That's why I say the 13-week cash flow forecast is crucial.
Mark Hart, the Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship here at Aston Business School. Many thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Steve, as always.
A big thank you also to Sandra Berns, the founder and owner of Centric HR, based in Staffordshire. We'll be back soon with another case study of how businesses are developing and growing with more crucial analysis and advice from academics here at Aston. Aston means business. SMEs building resilience to COVID-19 challenges. Thanks for listening.